Hi there, I'm Greg Miller and welcome to lesson number 4 in the guitar class. Today I want to talk a little bit about blues scales. The blues scale is a scale that is used real extensively in blues, obviously, but rock and roll, and it tends to be associated with certain guitar players a lot too. Players like Jimi Hendrix and Eric Clapton, stuff like that. They use this scale a lot. And what it is, it's basically you can think about it as a modification of a major scale. And we haven't talked about major scales yet, but the blues scale tends to people tend to relate to it real well because they hear it a lot. Maybe we'll just start by I'll just show it to you and show you a few things you can do. I'll give you 6 tuning notes before we start, though. So here's the low E string, and the A, and the D, and the G, and the B, and the high E. The blues scale is a fairly comfortable thing to play. You don't have to stretch more than 4 frets. Whenever you play a scale, what you should try to do is to curl your fingers around and hang them over top of 4 consecutive frets, if that scale is within those 4 frets. You don't want to pull your whole hand away every time you play a note. What'll happen is you'll start getting those kind of sounds in the middle of the scale, and it'll slow you down a whole bunch. You want to just release your fingers as opposed to removing your fingers. Just lift your finger off high enough to get it away from the string, but not far enough to have to actually move your whole wrist and your third knuckles here. The blues scale looks like this and sounds like this. There's a few different scales that are called blues scales. This is just one of them. There's probably about 3 or 4 that you could refer to as a blues scale. All as they are is just more or less notes than this one. For those of you who are interested, it takes its root from a pentatonic scale, a minor pentatonic scale. It has minor thirds in it and minor sevenths in it, and has a flat fifth. But we can talk about that later. This scale is really lends itself to bending too, which you hear a lot of players. Which is a real bluesy sounding thing. This scale is a good scale to start out with because, like I said, your ear is probably tuned to it already if you've listened to everybody from, like I said, Eric Clapton to Guns N' Roses and Metallica, and a lot of the contemporary rock and roll guys use it. I'll just run through it and show you how it's played. You pick a note, whatever root you want to use for the scale. An F for a G or an A or an A flat or an F sharp, it doesn't matter. The pattern is always identical. Once you learn the pattern, you can play the pattern anywhere on the neck, and the only thing that changes is the letter name of the scale. Just like those bar chords we played, they were always a major chord if you keep the same shape, or always a dominant chord if you keep the same shape. The only thing that changed was the letter name of the chord. So when you play the blues scale, it's always the same shape. The only thing that changes is the letter name or the root of the scale. So it doesn't really matter where I show you the scale on the neck. When you're practicing it, if you're having a problem stretching that far, don't play it so far down on the neck. Maybe move it up here where where the frets are closer together and closer to the natural spacing of your fingers. That may help you with that. When you play scales generally, it's a good idea to play from the lowest note to the highest note and back again. So we'll start on the lowest note. And what I'll do here is I'll play an A blues scale. So I'll start on this A note, which is at the 5th fret on the low E string. And it's your index finger, and then your ring finger, and your pinky. And your index, middle, ring, and index, ring. That's one octave of the scale. The next octave of the scale is index, ring, pinky, index, pinky, index, ring, pinky. Oops. When you learn these scales, sometimes it's a real cool idea to take them in octave blocks and learn them like that, like I showed you. Get used to playing one octave of the scale, so you don't have to worry about all 6 strings at once. And then take the second octave and finish the scale up from there, and then practice playing the whole thing. And like I said, you can move the scale all over the place. When you play it, I guess generally from a learning point of view, it's better to keep your thumb in one spot and basically behind your middle finger. If you leave your thumb in one spot, what'll happen is that it'll anchor your hand, and because you're not moving all over the place in a scale like this, you're basically just rotating your hand around and pivoting off that one point of your thumb. You tend not to get lost. When you think about scales and playing scales like this, each finger should be assigned to a fret, and you shouldn't waver from it. And when you're reading them off of a piece of paper like a fretboard diagram, all you have to think about is to drop your index, middle, ring, or pinky. You don't have to think about 6th fret on the low E string. Just think pinky, and your pinky will be above that fret naturally, and you can just drop it down. If you send me an envelope with your name and a stamp on it to the address at in the credits at the end of the video, I can mail you out these 12 lessons, and I'll give you these scales written out on a piece of paper along with the fretboard diagram, and I'll show you how to read it and all that kind of stuff. And that'll help you get pictures of these scales in your head, which I think is a real important part about being able to play these things and not having to think about them consciously all the time. Playing the scale should just roll off your fingers, and you shouldn't really have to think about it at all. And the way to achieve that is just to practice it over and over and over and over and over. Either you can just sit around when you're watching television and just play it up and down and up and down and up and down. The biggest cause of people making mistakes when they play a scale is that they falter and waver because they're not absolutely positive of what note they should be playing next, and so their fingers will shake and they'll slide across notes and stuff. If you just play the scale really slow and think about each note and listen to each note as it drops, think about the scale as a melody and hearing it play up to a point and back down to the point that you started, that may help it root it in your mind a little bit better. I guess I've been just unconsciously alternate picking without telling you about it. Alternate picking is when you pick down and up, down and up. When you start playing, picking down like that is the natural tendency. What you should do to make the scale sound smoother and to develop your speed a bit better is to alternate the direction that you pick, either toward the floor or toward the ceiling. If the last note that you picked was down, the next one should be up. Doesn't matter if you're switching strings or if it's the same note or anything. Just constantly move your hand up and down. So you'd play down, up, 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 down, down, up, 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 down. You may find that your hand will flip around and your upstroke will be a little sort of fly away. One idea is to give your right hand a reference point or an anchor point. Some people rest their wrist on the bridge right there. Some people hook their finger under the string, and I think most people tend to change that technique depending on what it is they're playing. If they're playing some kind of a real speedy kind of a thing, or if they're playing it real slow and long. Those different techniques will allow you to mute strings and cut strings out and stop strings from ringing, which is a problem when playing scales. You'll tend to hear the previous strings ringing, and if you anchor your hand here, you can roll your hand on that string like that to kill the strings previous and the upcoming ones. But again, that's a technique that just kind of naturally develops. You'll find the problem of having all those strings ringing, and your right hand will naturally just mute those strings out. So be conscious of it, but don't worry about it. The reason that people learn scales, from a real practical point of view anyway, when they're just trying to learn to play, is that scales are sort of skeletons that solos are built around. When you watch somebody play a guitar solo, what they're doing is taking notes out of one scale or many scales and putting them together in a sequence and creating a melody line. And a lot of solos are improvised, meaning that the player hasn't written the solo before he plays it. He just plays what he feels according to the chord changes. The band, being the bass player and the keyboard player and the drummer to some extent too, will change chords, and the guitar player or the soloist, be a sax player or a keyboard player or anything, will change the scale that they use according to the chord that's being played by the rest of the band. And good soloists will take you from one chord to the next very smoothly, and they'll kind of snake in and out of notes, and it's a real art form to be able to improvise on the fly like that. A lot of the cliche kind of guitar riffs and licks that you hear are pulled out of scales like the pentatonic scale or this blues scale. And when you're playing the scale, you may find that if you bend a note or if you vibrato a note, move it up and down, that some of those sounds will be familiar to you, and you'll recognize them, having heard them before. Maybe what I'll do is just do a little bit of improv off of this blues scale for you and let you hear what it can sound like. And just to note, these notes, when you're practicing the scale itself, they should be played in ascending or descending order, from the lowest note to the highest note in the scale and then back again. But when you solo, you don't want to do that, or else you'll end up sounding like a scale. Yeah, you want to pick notes out of the scale, not so much in a random order. There is logic behind it. But you want to create a melody. That's the important thing. That's what you're trying to accomplish, is to make some kind of a piece of music. You don't want it to sound like a rudiment or some real dry sounding scale. I'll just do a bit of blowing here. I'll do this in the key of A, and I'll play an A major chord every now and then so you can hear the tonality of the A blues scale over top of an A major chord. Those notes, all of those notes are in this pentatonic scale, and after you play it for a while, you start hearing, sort of seeing little boxes and stuff like that, little patterns within the pattern of the scale. This is a dangerous scale in a sense too, is that a lot of people get sucked into the pentatonic rut, it's called, and every solo they play uses this scale, and they start to get real They always sound the same. They get real sterile sounding. And this is not it's not that this scale is bad or a sterile sounding scale. If you do that with any scale, it'll be like that. But this is a good scale to base things on. But you do have to stretch out of it. You can't learn this one scale and expect to be able to solo for hours on it. Even blues players who use this scale extensively will stretch out and take a chance, kind of moving outside the chord and playing notes that aren't totally in keeping with the chord that the band's playing, and that creates tension, and it builds excitement in the solo, and then they come back into it. Maybe in this scale, I'll show you where the roots land. The first root is the note that you start on. The second root is on the D string. So those two notes, in this case, are A's. And the third note is on the E string at the 5th fret. The same fret that it is on the low E string. They're both E strings, so therefore the notes both ascend in the same way, and you're gonna arrive at an A on both strings there. When you're playing this scale, when you're trying to improvise with it, trying to make something up, those are the 3 notes that you can consider almost your home base. You can play around and play the other notes in any order you want. Almost random at the beginning is a way to start, just to get your fingers not doing it in ascending or descending order. When you play something and you want to make it sound like you finished a phrase, or you finished saying what you want to say, land on one of those notes, and what'll happen is the whole phrase will sound like you've made a statement and you've kind of put a period at the end of it. And I'll show you what I mean. That last note is a root, is an A, or that last note is an A, or that last note is an A. There are other notes in the scale that you can use as that home base, but the root of the scale will always save you. All of the notes in pretty much every scale have musical direction toward the root. They're all moving toward the root. You can get different sounds by using other notes as home base. If you take just randomly picking one of the notes, you can create different feels at the end of your phrases and stuff like that. And the best way to learn that stuff is to, one, listen to guitar players that you like and try to tune your ear into what they're playing, not how good it sounds and how much you like it, but try to listen past the drummer and the singer and all that stuff, and just try to listen to the individual notes that they're playing and how they're attacking them, and if they're sliding or if they're doing little other sort of interesting things. Even if you don't understand what they are, remember what they sound like, and eventually, even if by accident, you will do them on your own. I took lessons and played for a long time, and when I started to think about theory seriously and started to look into it, I started to learn the names of some techniques and some scales and shapes and things like that that I was playing, and I realized that I had been playing these things for years, and I just didn't know what to call them. And when I learned this theory, I knew that what I was playing was like a major chord or a minor chord. But once I learned the theory, I realized that I had been playing this stuff for years, and I didn't understand the intrinsic qualities about it. So when you noodle around with this stuff, you'll find that you may hear things that you think sound cool. Just try to remember what you did, and even write them down on a piece of paper as best you can. And eventually you probably will get interested in learning some theory, if you're not already now. And when you do, you'll find out that you play a lot of things that have fancy names. behind them. And it's real neat to see that you actually do play a lot of things that you're supposed to play. You just didn't realize it because you didn't know what they were called. And that really starts to show when you play scales and practice scales. They little things that you'll unconsciously do, like slide into a note like that, will totally change the way that the scale sounds and the way the phrase moves. So practice that scale, descending and ascending. An exercise to get yourself going with that is to play it starting on the lowest fret and moving up one fret. Moving up one fret. And just keep going all the way up. And just like the bar chords got tighter and tighter and tighter as you went up, the scale will get tighter and tighter on the way up. And you probably will reach a point on the neck where your hand feels the most comfortable. People with bigger hands tend to feel better down here because the frets are farther apart. And people with small hands like mine feel better like at the 12th fret. I can put my fingers right together and they kind of land on the right spot. This alternate picking stuff, again, this is another thing that really just comes with practice. There's a lot of other little ins and outs to it. In the first lesson I talked about where the motion from your right hand comes, and I talked about it with reference to strumming and playing chords and stuff like that. It really comes into play with alternate picking. Your shoulder and your elbow and your wrist and your fingers are the 4 places where you can get motion out of your arm. And when you're alternate picking, if you want to pick real clean and quiet, you may only just pick with your finger like that and move your hand up and down with your elbow. But when you start playing a lot quicker, you tend to, muscles start to tense up in your arm in certain places, and it's good sometimes and it's not good other times. But you'll find that you can get speed from different parts of your arm and your fingers and your wrist, and they all are used in conjunction with one another. When you play, it's a real neat kind of exercise to take that scale and try to lock your wrist and lock your elbow and lock your shoulder, and just put your hand somewhere and try to play all those notes without moving your wrist at all. And you'll find that you can't get to those lower strings because your fingers aren't long enough. So you have to move your wrist to kind of sweep across those strings. And you'll find that's a little restricting, so if you move your elbow, your wrist and fingers can move a little bit, and your elbow will make those major movements. And as you speed up, you'll find that more and more and more motion will come from your elbow and your shoulder, and your wrist and fingers may lock up a bit. Your fingers never totally lock up because they tend to dig in. You can change the angle of the pick when it hits the guitar or the string. Well, I'll show you the difference when you play some really quick stuff. If you play this really slow, or if you play it really quick, see that your whole forearm will kind of shake up and down. And that kind of speed of alternate picking comes with just practicing a real steady motion, and a lot of that will come from if you practice your chords up and down, and your arm will get used to just moving up and down, and you won't have to consciously think about having to get it to move and not stop. That right arm motion lends itself to every type of music. Even if you make a mistake playing a chord, if you can keep your right hand going like that and keep a rhythm going, people will tend to almost forgive you for it because you'll still have some groove and the music will be moving along. You can really, like I think it was the last lesson that we talked about, being able to just take some muted chords and do that. That'll help your alternate picking stuff too. I'll just give you an example of that kind of that up and down motion. If you play you can just squeeze chords on and off, and if you just minimize the motion that's happening there, You can put it over top of one string like that. And you can just pick one string up and down, constantly moving like that, over and over, and just slide up and down the fingerboard. You don't have to worry about the notes so much, because what you're working on is your right hand. You don't even have to think about the notes that you're playing, just to get your right hand to unconsciously move up and down when you want it to. And you can keep running on like that. So work on that pentatonic scale, the blues scale, playing it ascending and descending, up and down, and move it all the way up and down the neck. Work on your alternate picking up and down like that, and make sure you do practice that pentatonic scale alternately like that. Only play it better than I just did. I'll practice this week too. So have a good one, and send me an address or an envelope with your address and your name on it and a stamp, and I'll send you out these lessons so that you can have some paper in front of you and maybe get a clearer picture of what I'm talking about when I'm doing it. So have a good week, and I'll see you next time.